So there is a tantalizing passage by Richard Strauss in his update of Hector Berlioz's Treatise on Instrumentation. In it, Strauss writes, through the courtesy of Monsieur Javert, I heard in the Brussels Conservatory a double bass oboe, whose tone had not the slightest similarity with the low notes of the bassoon. It was, down to the extreme depth, the typical sham timbre of the oboe. If in the near future our ears should demand even finer differentiations of sound and a still greater wealth of tonal colors, we might reintroduce this instrument into the orchestra. Thus, each individual timbre would be represented by a whole family group instead of the one or two members we have at present. He then postulates what an oboe family within an orchestra that included a double bass or contrabass oboe would be constituted of. 4 oboes, 2 oboes d'amore, 2 English horns, 1 heckelphone, 1 double bass oboe. And this is really kind of the last time we ever hear anything about a contrabass oboe. Now, Strauss is generally a reliable source, so we should take him at his word that he probably heard some instrument oboe-like in the bassoon range. What that instrument was is up for debate. I have seen some speculation that he might have heard a bass sarrusophone, but we really don't know. No trace of this instrument has survived. We have no documentation in any museum. We have no documentation in any letters of this instrument. Nothing. We don't know what he heard. So it's kind of interesting to think Strauss heard an instrument no one else knows about. And no one has heard of it since. So this leaves us with the question, what is the contrabass oboe? Now, we do have at least one surviving instrument from the 1700s. It's a straight instrument, but it was probably just for show. It wasn't really that functioning. Luray in the 1880s, 1890s talked about possibly building one, but they never did. So what I'm going to ask today is, how big would a contrabass oboe be? Well, I have behind me, this is as close to a oboe as I have in my collection. Unfortunately, oboe is still the one woodwind I am lacking, but this is a 3D model of a Baroque oboe. This gives you a rough idea of the size of the oboe. It's about 2 feet long. This instrument goes down to C, though it can play a B if you close up the lowest vent holes in the bell. The other instrument we know, of course, is the bassoon. And I have a bassoon here. Now, the bassoon is pitched an octave and a half below the oboe. However, because it has a large extended downward compass, we think of it as being 2 octaves lower than the oboe because the lowest note of the bassoon is B flat 1. That note would be the same lowest note of our hypothetical contrabass oboe. So we could think that the bassoon is about the right size for a contrabass oboe. However, the bassoon is in F and a contrabass oboe would be in C. So its fundamental scale would be quite a bit bigger than this instrument. Now, where that comes into play is how the fundamental scale is going to be arranged on the instrument. On the bassoon, the lowest F is down here. It's just barely on the ascending tube of the boot joint. Whereas the G key is right here. It is on the descending part. So fingers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are descending. And finger 7, F, is barely ascending. This would be perfectly fine for an instrument in F in the oboe family. But we're not talking about an instrument in F, we're talking about an instrument in C, much bigger. The low C, you would have to go all the way back up to here. So all the way down, all the way back up to get your 7-finger note. That would require a lot of extensive keywork. It would actually be very, very difficult to make. The only instruments that we have that have keywork that extensive are the LeBlanc paperclip contrabass clarinets and the contrabassoon. It would be actually easier to build an instrument larger than the bassoon that is much taller on the descending tube. Well, it just happens that I have an instrument that would be the exact same pitch in the fundamental scale as a contrabass oboe. The great bassoon. This is in C, the same fundamental pitch as the contrabass oboe. Now, of course, the great bassoon is so big you can't see it in the screen. There's no way I could back my camera up far enough that you can both still see me in focus and see the bell. Doesn't matter though, because the bass joint and the bell, all nearly 5 feet of its length, even on the ground it's still too tall, that is all extended register. And what we're left with is something like this. And this will get me down to just about where I need to go. It will get me almost down to a written B on the contrabass oboe. Well, we want the B flat. I just happen to have the first third of the bass joint of the great bassoon. So let's just stick that in. And this happens to have the lowest tone hole right here. That would be a concert B flat. And lo and behold, this would be the right size for a contrabass oboe. The extended range, so anything for the right or left pinky would be on the ascending part of the tube. See if I can get this here. So it would come from here on up to here. This would be where the bell is. I can put it right on the floor. I can hold it like this, and this would not be uncomfortable. Of course, you wouldn't do a contrabass oboe in a boot style like you would on bassoon. You would have 2 independent tubes. But this gives you an idea of about how big a contrabass oboe would be. Roughly the same scale as well as a bass saxophone. Or almost a contralto clarinet, but contralto clarinet's scale is lower still. So that gives you some idea. It's an interesting thought experiment, one that I've been thinking a lot about lately. There may be a good reason I'm thinking about it. We will see. But yeah, so if you ever wondered how big would a contrabass oboe be, about yay big. Let me know what you think. Is contrabass oboe something you would like to see as a possible addition to our woodwind section? Or do you think the bassoon is going to be able to just cover it just fine? Maybe both, maybe neither. Leave your comment down below. Let me know what you think.